My name is Judith Thompson, and at 29, I thought I had grown used to being invisible. Invisible at family dinners, invisible during birthdays, invisible even in the way my mother, Frances, spoke about her children. To her, I had never been more than a mistake she had to drag along through life. My sister, Veronica, 3 years younger, was her pride. Her golden girl. Her beautiful, charming daughter who, in our mother's words, deserved everything. I had been told more times than I could count that I was worthless. Tonight, as I sat in a leather chair inside the polished mahogany conference room of Harrison and Kowalski attorneys at law, those words returned again, sharp and venomous. Veronica deserves everything. You're worthless and always have been, Frances spat, her voice slicing through the heavy silence of the room like a blade. The words should have stung. They always had. But tonight, they landed differently. Almost like punctuation at the end of a long, ugly sentence I had read before. I folded my hands neatly in my lap, forcing myself to keep my breathing steady. I was not here to argue. I was here to witness what would finally unravel years of cruelty and entitlement. Veronica sat beside my mother, tapping her manicured nails impatiently on the table. She looked every bit the woman my mother adored, glossy chestnut hair perfectly curled, lips painted in a shade that whispered sophistication, eyes glittering with the greedy anticipation of someone who believed she had already won. The lawyers were running late, but Frances couldn't help herself. She paced behind my sister like a general who believed she had already conquered the battlefield. Rose always knew Veronica was special, she announced to no one in particular. Beautiful, charming, everything a grandmother could want in a granddaughter. You, Judith, were just, there. A burden. The words clawed at my chest like they had since childhood. But this time I pressed them down, burying the sting under the quiet strength I had built over 3 years of careful preparation. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily. Each chime, each second, pushed us closer to the moment that would change everything. If there was one person who had ever seen me, truly seen me, it was my grandmother, Rose. For the last 3 years of her life, I had driven 45 minutes twice a week to visit her little house in the Minneapolis suburbs. To my mother and sister, these visits were acts of charity. They sneered at the thought of me wasting time with an old woman, as if companionship, listening, and loyalty were somehow beneath them. In reality, those afternoons had been lessons. Grandma Rose was no ordinary retiree. The world saw her as a sweet, quiet widow living off a modest pension and Social Security. But behind the lace curtains of her home, Rose managed something extraordinary, a carefully built business empire worth over $15 million. She had started with my grandfather's life insurance payout. While Frances squandered her own windfalls at casinos, Rose invested in small businesses, reinvested the profits, and slowly acquired controlling stakes in 5 different companies. Catering, publishing, real estate, software, civil engineering, she had her hands in them all. When she first showed me the folders, I thought she was joking. Frances has a problem, Judith, she said one chilly Tuesday over chamomile tea. I've watched her gamble away everything she touches. Your father's insurance. A car settlement. Even Veronica's college fund. If she knew about these businesses, they'd be gone before I was buried. I swallowed hard. So why show me? Her eyes softened. Because you don't see dollar signs when you look at me. You see me. And these businesses, they'll need someone who understands their value, not just the money they bring. From then on, every Tuesday and Thursday became training. She taught me to read financial reports, recognize patterns, talk to managers, and plan strategies. She had already met with lawyers, accountants, and business partners to ensure that when the time came, everything would pass seamlessly to me. She never once used the word revenge. But I could see in her eyes that she knew what her daughter and granddaughter expected, and she had no intention of rewarding greed. The door finally opened. Mr. Harrison, a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes, entered carrying a leather briefcase. Beside him walked another woman, slim, confident, and precise. She was Margaret Kowalski, the corporate attorney who had been guiding Rose's succession plan for years. Their presence shifted the air. Frances smoothed her hair, straightened her blazer, and sat down, trying to compose herself as if the entire room existed for her performance. Veronica's lips curved into a little smirk, like a child about to open birthday presents. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and began. The last will and testament of Rose Elizabeth Thompson. My heart pounded, but I kept my expression calm. Frances leaned forward, practically trembling with greed. To my granddaughter, Veronica, Harrison read, I leave my family home at 1247 Elm Street, with all furnishings, fixtures, and belongings. I also bequeath to Veronica my jewelry collection and the contents of my savings account. Veronica squealed, her hands flying to her mouth like a bad actress. Frances gasped dramatically, already whispering to her about renovations and Italian fixtures. They were too busy congratulating themselves to notice me. My grandmother had warned me, they will think they have won first. Let them taste the illusion before it's taken away. I sat in silence, waiting. And to my granddaughter, Judith, Harrison continued, I leave my collection of business documents and corporate files stored in my home office. Frances barked out a laugh. Paperwork? That's perfect. Judith always was good for filing things away. Veronica giggled. Their laughter echoed in my ears. For years, I had been their punching bag, their scapegoat. But now, those cruel chuckles would soon catch in their throats. Harrison folded the will. But instead of closing his case, he exchanged a look with Margaret. And that was when everything began to unravel. Margaret spread thick binders across the table. The will covers Rose's personal property. But her estate included more than a house and jewelry. For the past 22 years, Rose owned controlling interests in 5 companies, valued at approximately $15 million. Silence. Frances blinked. Veronica's painted smile slipped. That's impossible, Frances snapped. My mother worked at the post office. She wasn't. She was a shrewd investor, Margaret interrupted calmly. She used her late husband's life insurance settlement as capital, reinvested carefully, and acquired majority stakes over 2 decades. These companies include North Peak Engineering, Rainer Publishing, Jasper Hollow Foods, Oxbend Technologies, and Larkspur and Finch Real Estate Development. The color drained from Veronica's face. Frances fumbled with one of the documents, scanning numbers she didn't understand. And who inherits those? Veronica whispered. Margaret turned to me. Judith Thompson has been designated as the successor for all 5 companies. She has been working with Rose for 3 years to prepare for this transition. The silence was deafening. Frances finally found her voice. No. No, that's manipulation. She doesn't know business. She's nothing. I looked her directly in the eye. I know enough. Grandma taught me. Every Tuesday and Thursday, while you were gambling or mocking her, she was showing me how to manage an empire. Veronica's face crumpled. You knew. You knew about the money, and you never told us. Rose asked me to keep it confidential, I said simply. Frances's mask cracked. This is unfair. Veronica is the rightful heir. The companies were never part of the personal estate, Margaret explained. They were held in trust with designated successors. Everything was notarized, filed, and reviewed by multiple attorneys. It's airtight. I watched my mother's confidence collapse piece by piece. She tried bargaining, denial, threats. But every desperate attempt was met with calm documentation, psychological evaluations proving Rose's competency, recordings of Frances begging for money, detailed notes of every debt. And then Margaret dropped the final blow. The assets left to Veronica, the house and jewelry, are encumbered by liens. Creditors will seize them to satisfy Frances's gambling debts. By law, they must be liquidated. The look on Veronica's face was pure devastation. So, I get nothing? Less than nothing, Margaret corrected gently. the liquidation may not even cover the full debt. I reached into my bag and pulled out the sealed envelope my grandmother had given me months before she passed. She wanted you to read this after the legal matters were settled. Frances's hand shook as she unfolded the letter. Her voice cracked as she read aloud. Frances, your gambling addiction has cost this family more than you will ever understand. You treated me as a wallet, not a mother. Veronica, you saw me only as a source of inheritance, dismissing my accomplishments. Judith, you respected me. You listened. You learned. That is why the businesses are hers. What you inherit, or fail to inherit, is the result of choices you made. I hope you learn, though I fear you may not. Love, Mother. The words filled the room with finality. Veronica sobbed. Frances sat rigid, the fight gone from her eyes. For the first time in my life, I saw her defeated, not by me, but by the consequences she had always refused to face. The months that followed were brutal for them. The house and jewelry barely covered 2/3 of the debts. Frances was forced into bankruptcy. Veronica's credit was destroyed. Their social circle, once filled with pretentious friends, learned the truth about the gambling, the lies, the debts. They were humiliated. For the first time in years, they had to work. Frances, at 54, took a cashier's job at a discount store. Veronica, stripped of her social status, struggled to hold even entry-level office work. Meanwhile, I stepped into the role Rose had prepared me for. Meetings, strategy sessions, financial reviews, it was overwhelming at first. But every time I doubted myself, I heard Rose's voice, "You can do this, Judith. You've already proven it." And I did. I wasn't just managing $15 million. I was honoring her legacy. Looking back on that day in the law office, I realize now that Rose's plan was never just about money. It was about justice. She had seen clearly what everyone else ignored, that entitlement destroys, that love and respect matter more than appearances. Frances and Veronica had spent their lives taking from Rose. Taking from me. Taking without gratitude, without acknowledgement. And finally, they had nothing left to take. I hadn't lifted a finger to destroy them. I had simply let them fall into the trap of their own making. And in the quiet moments, when I sip chamomile tea at my desk, I feel her presence beside me. My grandmother, the woman everyone underestimated, who built an empire and entrusted it to the invisible granddaughter. The revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was simply this. They lost everything. And I finally became everything they said I could never be.